Welcome to What a Word is Worth, a space for creative minds to speak about viable ways to heal the world through writing and other inventive mediums. This is your host, Marianela Medrano. I am the founder of Palabra Training Center, where words are giving us medicine. And today I have the privilege and the joy of having with us Dr. Shelly Harrell, a licensed psychologist who practices in different areas, including psychotherapy and relationship issues, and also is someone who pays a lot of attention to contemplative practices and mental health and cultural identity, which are the themes that actually run through this podcast. So welcome, Shelly.
Thank you. Thank you, Marianela. And it's very nice to be here with you. And we've communicated a bit and I know we share some passions and some interests. So I'm glad to have a conversation.
Yes, it's amazing how our paths crisscrossed in so many ways. Yes, so wonderful. Yes. And one of the ways is writing. So I know that you use writing as an integral part of your work. Yeah. Do you see writing as a catalyst of change? And if that is the case, how does that work? How do you incorporate writing into what you do in helping others create changes?
Yes. Well, writing absolutely is a catalyst for change, right? It's I think one of the most powerful aspects of writing is it's an integrative function by nature, right? Mm-hmm. So it's head and heart, right, that are kind of both present in the writing process. And so just in that task of becoming more integrated, becoming less fragmented, writing helps us become less fragmented and more integrated. So I think, not everyone likes to journal in some formal way, excuse me, but I think writing can take so many other paths. Think about poetry, songwriting, even making lists of things. There's so many outlets for writing. I think it's also, for me, really connected very, very nicely with mind, body, and contemplative practices. It both can be used as an entry to practice, as well as a processing and documenting, right? As well as being a practice itself.
Exactly.
Right? So I think that writing kind of plays a role in all of those different phases of contemplative mind-body practices. So sometimes for people who, may have some challenges just sort of dropping into experience immediately, that writing can be a transitional space. Right, to really begin to move towards inner experience, right? So giving prompts that help people to begin to tap in before doing a more body oriented or other kind of meditative practice, right? I think writing can be a meditation, right? So writing is a meditation, or can be a meditation. And processes that encourage sort of the I don't want to say it, like almost downloading of spiritual ancestral wisdom experiences to come through us in writing. It very much is a contemplative mind, body, spiritual practice. And then the sort of debriefing that we can do after, and a more traditional mind-body practice of meditative visualization, guided meditation, or other kinds of practice to document that and really, kind of reflect, use the writing to reflect and find meaning, right? And sometimes I know for myself, the metabolizing process is occurring, and I want to document what's metabolizing, what has happened. And sometimes writing can facilitate that metabolizing process. So after meditation, there's a lot that maybe has gotten stirred up or that has come up, and writing can document that. And I think the last piece is particular to populations that experience oppression in some form, which is the healing function of finding voice. So for women, for BIPOC populations, Indigenous, Black populations, where voices are silenced, or unwanted, or distorted, or minimized, or spoken for, writing is a way to claim our voice. Right. So there's just, writing is a lot. It does a lot. I think that there's just so many ways to use writing as healing. And of course, the creative process. Right?
Yes.
Just the downloading of creative expression.
I thank you so much for giving such a wide, using such a wide lens to depict writing and to answer my question. And yes, as you say, that integrated function of writing as something that we do with both mind, body, and spirit, because that is all integrated. And that's why I call it a practice as a spiritual practice.
Yes.
And,
yes.
Can you tell us more about the healing function and the inviting individuals to give voice to perhaps what to them feels not possible, right? When we talk about oppression, when we think about the denial of having a voice, and that we know, yes, we know that the healing comes through giving voice to that. Can you say more about the work that you perhaps give the audience an example of a particular facilitation that you have done that has kept you inspired to go deeper into the process of facilitating writing as both an exploration and also a liberation process?
Yeah. Well, just speaking to, again, use the word liberation, the liberatory function of writing, right? It's a freedom, right? It's a freedom that can be experienced in writing. And I think for some people, can be the first time there is a freedom of speech.
Yeah.
Right. So depending on the family setting or the community setting, the school setting, unfortunately for some children, where voice is not encouraged. Right. And I want to kind of name this in the context of how racism, sexism, heterosexism can be internalized, right? So that process of internalizing societal expectations, internalizing stereotypes, right? Even internalizing prejudice against our own groups, right? So women internalizing negative stereotypes about other women and acting those out in a prejudiced way. People of color, LGBTQ, wherever there is this really deeply embedded, ism in society, there's the risk to take that on as if it's truth. Absolutely. As if it's truth, and actually believe that our we are not capable of certain things, or that, something isn't our place, or, to feel less qualified, less smart, less, less of a right to be in certain spaces, to silence because we don't want to be disapproved of, that we want the approval of, whoever is in the dominant space. And so all of these things can contribute to a silencing that happens, right? It's because we want to be accepted, or we're fearful. And writing helps to claim that power back, right? Through words, through naming, this is me. This is who I am. This is what I speak. This is what I see in the world. This is what I see. Right. So even just looking at the world in a different way, other than what's been told to us.
Right. Like looking twice. And as you were saying, for people who, let's say, going back to what you were saying, that being heterosexual is considered to be the norm, right? So if I am in a community where that is the norm, then assuming myself as anything else is not something that's going to be easy to voice. So helping communities who need to identify their truest essence is an important thing that writing can definitely facilitate.
Yes.
For
stating, this is who I am.
Yes.
This is a powerful act in and of itself.
Yes. It's the naming. It's the
Mm-hmm.
naming. And that also, as you were pointing out before, that yes, there is the naming, there is the establishing of what is, of my truth, and then the processing of what does it mean to then, come into the public eye as who I am, right? Then there is that processing. Thank you. Thank you for putting it in that light. And the other thing that crosses our paths, or that makes our paths come together, is our ancestry. And specifically, I know that you have done, or you do work with the Yoruba tradition, and that I saw, much to my joy, that you lean on Ashe as a concept to come forward the vital life energy that activates the power of manifestation, right? The power of, as we were saying, the power of being, of I am here. And you integrate that in the meditation practice that you offer. So again, tell us more about when you began these offerings, specifically calling upon the ancestral forces and power. How was that experience? Was it widely received, or were there moments where you were asking yourself, can I do this, or is this the right thing?
Yeah. This is great. So let me kind of jump 2 steps back, and then kind of draw a connection. So as you mentioned in the introduction, I'm a psychotherapist, I'm a psychologist. I was trained in the early 80s, is when I was in my doctoral program, and there was nothing in the literature on working with culturally diverse groups. I think a book came out in 1982 called Minority Mental Health, by Enrico Jones, and it was, and this was like, wow, what I began to notice in my training is that while there's a fundamental power of many psychotherapies. So I'm not at
Mhm.
all saying throw the baby out with the bathwater. There is some
Right.
power in some of our various psychotherapies, from psychodynamic to cognitive behavioral to humanistic and existential family systems. However, they often don't capture culture and meet people where they are in
Mhm.
terms of cultural values and cultural ways of being and cultural beliefs about illness and healing and health.
Yeah.
And so what I found was, sometimes these therapies could work okay, but
Mhm.
something was missing.
Mhm.
And so much of my career has been trying to identify, how do we most effectively deliver services to BIPOC populations?
Mhm.
And for me, to African American and African descended populations more specifically. But
Mhm.
this field of culture and mental health, I think, and culture and wellness, even more broadly,
Mhm.
is
Mhm.
really important.
Mhm.
And as I began to really integrate mind, body, and contemplative practices more, and have become a certified meditation teacher and all of that, it's also shows up there,
Yeah.
right? So
Mhm.
so again, I am a certified mindfulness teacher. I really have a lot of um, commitment and belief in that practice.
Mhm.
However, sometimes the way that it has been delivered doesn't feel right or
Mhm.
fit or for various BIPOC populations. And
Absolutely.
and so that's been the journey, is how do we integrate culture? Um, Duran and colleagues have um, talked about the concept of soul wounding,
Mhm.
right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
and the ways that historical and collective trauma have a soul wounding effect, which is both individual, spiritual, and collective, communal,
Mhm.
right? And
Mhm.
they state culture is part of the soul,
Exactly. It's
right?
an,
Culture is
it's
part of the
part and
soul,
parcel.
and
Yes,
so
you cannot
culture
separate.
culture is healing.
Yeah.
So then beginning to really look, not only how do we adapt therapies for culture,
Mhm.
but how can we utilize cultural resources for
Mhm.
healing? How
Yeah.
can we draw upon culture as a healing resource and connection to culture as a
Yeah.
healing resource? So that's the connection. So for
Yeah.
me, really looking at African and African diasporic culture is as a resource for all of humanity, but particularly a resource for Black, Indigenous people of color, right?
As a
But
way to write, and yeah.
as a
And
way to draw upon those resources. So, for
yeah.
example, where I started was just using quotes and proverbs
Mm.
and using those as writing prompts, and
Mhm.
using intentionally quotes and proverbs, quotes by Black and BIPOC folks, and proverbs, African proverbs, um, and just witnessing how much those resonate. That
Mm.
there's an energy in those words that's
Mm.
beyond the words that are put together, and
Yeah.
beyond whoever the individual is that said them. That words carry this energy and power and ancestral kind of healing. And so using quotes and proverbs that are culturally resonant as prompts for writing, I have found to be a really, really powerful practice. And then even looking more deeply into various cultural traditions. You mentioned, Yoruba
Mm.
practices, and the nature of the Middle Passage,
Mhm.
and the human trafficking of
Mhm.
African peoples,
Yeah.
took us various places. So we all came,
Mhm.
generally from West and some
Mhm.
Central Africa.
Mhm.
But the ships went to different
Yeah.
places. So we have the United States, Cuba, Brazil, throughout the Caribbean, and the cultural retentions are powerful. So part of
Mhm.
my sabbatical right now has been doing some traveling. I just returned from Cuba. I was in Ghana. I was in Senegal, um, and really feeling those African cultural traditions. And because much of our um, roots were West African, the Yoruba
Mhm.
tradition is
Mhm.
part of the cultural retention that we see, right?
Mhm.
Among many others, but that's one. And so the we see even in more popular or public African American spaces, the use of the term ashe has
Mhm.
become over
Like
time.
an invocation.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes. It's
Mhm.
said at the end of prayers, said at the
Yeah.
end of
Yeah.
speeches,
Yeah.
amen and ashe,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So there was something that also has drawn us
Yeah.
to this word and this concept and the ancestral and spiritual and cultural energy that's embedded in this word. And
Yeah.
so part of what I do with soulfulness is explore ways of integrating various cultural elements, uh, and to consider how to make contemplative and mind-body practices more available, accessible, and resonant. And so one practice is this Ashe meditation. Yes.
Yeah, and that, yes, that resonance, looking for the resonance, and so many things I want to pull from here. But I'm so glad that you honored Eduardo Duran's work. And when I think about what he did in Buddha in Red Face,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and
Yes. Yes.
how basically the force for us who researchers, I think, is in looking into syncretism and
Mhm.
how
Mhm.
much,
Mhm.
the roots are, it's not diluted. They have been fortified in
Yes.
syncretism.
Absolutely.
I know in the research I did in the Dominican Republic with the indigenous people, the Tainos, and then
Yes.
I
Yes.
have looked at the interface of the Tainos and the African traditions, and specifically the Yoruba. That's where our force is.
I saw
Right?
that same secretism in
Yeah.
Cuba with the
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Tainos and African Yoruba
Yes, the
traditions
whole
as well. Yeah,
Caribbean, and the
yeah,
whole
yeah, yeah,
Caribbean
yeah,
is like
yeah.
that.
Mm-hmm.
So I like your work because of that, because you are extracting these things to solidify, to help individuals, as you were saying before, help individuals find their voice
Mm-hmm.
and stand proud
Yes.
in that identity, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's by rescuing these various practices, stories. I mean,
Yes.
stories,
Yes. Yes.
stories. If we know anything about who we are, is thanks to the oral tradition,
That's right.
right? So
That's
we
right.
have
That's
to, if that was able to sustain our ancestry, we will be silly not to keep
right.
moving it
That's right.
forward.
That's right.
So is that what brought you then into this trip? Is the research that you're
Yes.
doing is trying
Yes.
to further affirm
Yes.
that?
And
Mhm.
explore throughout the African diaspora
Mhm.
resources for healing, how
Mhm.
culture provides resources for healing, because I think identity is healing, right?
Yeah.
When we can have a strong sense of who we are,
Yeah, it's
right?
medicine.
That's medicine. That's
Yeah.
medicine. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And
Yeah.
so it's both the act of connection to
Yeah.
culture and to
Yeah.
heritage and to ancestors, right?
Yeah.
The act of connection, or better, reconnection,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Reconnecting to what's been lost, to
Yeah.
what's been
Re-envisioning.
forgotten, to what's
Yeah.
been lost, forgotten, stolen, destroyed,
Yeah.
to what we've
Yeah.
been disconnected from. So the act of reconnecting is just nourishing. It's life-giving for people.
Is that what you call the emancipatory contemplative practice?
Yes,
I think
yes.
you
Yeah,
referred to
yeah,
that
yes, yes, yes.
in so can you say more about that, and also this idea of helping people center themselves to find strategies to decolonizing
Yeah,
inner and outer life, right? Which
yes,
I
yeah,
think our work is so aligned in that sense that I just want to hear more about how you are facilitating these transformative practices to do away with internalized oppression and to advance somatic, psycho, spiritual,
yes,
relational, and collective liberatory
yes, yes,
practices.
yes. So,
Um,
so I think it's very intentionally
mhm,
centering the liberatory function
yeah.
of mind, body, and contemplative practices. And I use those terms somewhat interchangeably. I mean, we could get into the
Mhm,
minutia of
mhm,
terminology. Um, and actually, mind, body is limiting in a cultural context and in an
mhm,
African-centered context. We'd speak more about soul body,
mhm,
right? About soul
mhm,
body practices,
mhm.
right? Practices that align and connect soul and body,
Yeah,
spirit and body,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
But even more broadly, we can think mind, body, soul practices, right? So one of the things that is central from this African-centered cultural perspective, this African diasporic perspective,
Mhm,
is not leaving out soul and spirit,
mhm,
right?
mhm,
We cannot
mhm.
leave out soul and spirit. So that's a problem with both of those terms, mind, body, and contemplative, is I think in practice, many practitioners integrate soul and spirit, but just the naming mind, body, contemplative leaves out, right, the importance of soul and spirit in the cultural context that I focus on. And
And
yeah,
do you see that as a byproduct of colonization? That,
yeah, yes.
kind of imposition of what?
Well, I see it in a couple of ways.
Mhm,
I see it in the byproduct of colonization. In part,
mhm,
is stripping of cultural annihilation.
yeah.
So taking original indigenous culture
Mhm,
and you know erasing it to the
yeah,
greatest extent possible, and
right.
then replacing it,
Mhm,
right? The attempt to replace it, we think about the Indian boarding schools here in the
mhm,
United States, right? The
mhm,
attempt to replace that with
mhm,
something that, whether it's Christianity, missionary
yeah,
work, or
yeah.
just the values of
And
the larger
language.
society and
And
language. Thank you.
language beginning,
Language,
I mean,
dress.
like
Yes,
the biggest erasure rest in the killing of our
yes,
languages.
yes.
Yeah,
Thank you. Yes,
yeah.
absolutely. And so the reclaiming of a cultural kind of sense of identity where
Mm-hmm,
it's not mechanistic. It's
mm-hmm,
not that we can
mm-hmm,
separate, cognition from
mm-hmm,
emotion from,
mm-hmm.
right? It's soul and spirit are part of how we experience ourselves in
Yeah,
connection, right?
yeah.
So again, the centrality of the concept of connection,
Mm-hmm,
connectedness. I talk a lot about
mm-hmm,
Ubuntu, right?
mm-hmm,
Which is that
mm-hmm.
South African
Yes,
principle
right,
of,
right. I
a
am because you
person,
are.
right?
Yeah.
I am because we are, and a person
Mm-hmm,
is a person through other persons,
mm-hmm.
and it's also speaks to just a consciousness of interconnectedness and interdependence, that we don't exist on our own,
Right.
right? So the linking back to what you were mentioning. So
Mm-hmm,
for me, emancipatory practice is in fundamentally not just a practice of freeing or releasing that which has been imposed, that which is harmful, that which is toxic, but it's also reconnecting and reclaiming that which has been lost or destroyed or erased, and not in an in a blind way, right? So we don't want to over idealize, like, pull from the past, like, yes, but in a way that feeds the process of becoming and feeds our process of ongoing evolution. So we need the past, we need to reconnect and reclaim and bring forward and revive that which is lost and forgotten, but not in a blind way, in the service of our ongoing evolution, so that we have a continuity and sense of who we are and where we come from. And so then we think about, so how can mind, body, and contemplative practices contribute to this? And it's very much about the process of experiential presence and awareness, right? So part of what oppression does is disconnects us, right? We become disembodied, we become dehumanized, we become disempowered, right? I talk about
and
the
we
five,
believe it, right? Like
right? And that was the next one, is delusion. Right.
Yes,
So delusion
exactly.
is the next, D of oppression. And and then we believe all of those things. Right. So emancipatory contemplative practice is about unlayering all of that to get to the truth of who we are, so that we can reconnect and reclaim from a solid kind of ground and evolve from that point, evolve having those resources to draw upon, those internal resources. But it starts with experiential presence. It starts with being able to name our experience. And be aware of when we're distorting and when we're believing the lie.
Yeah, I like the evolutionary perspective that you're holding in this, and also this idea that in order for us to move forward, we do have to take the look back, right, and see where we come from. And it is in seeing back that we can have the affirmation to continue evolving. It's not about going back, as I said, when I talk about, the particular case of the Dominican Republic with the Taino and African Yoruba roots, that is not about going and recreating tribes. And that's not what we're talking about. But that there is something about identity that prepares us, that looking back prepares us to stay in the moment. And then to take the action to move into the future. And
have the roots, to have the grounding. We can't do anything without being rooted.
Right.
We need to be rooted in order to grow and to rise. And so those roots are necessary for our growth. It's not about living in the past or staying in the past. It's about becoming rooted. So that we can grow. When you were speaking, I was thinking about in Ghana, the Akan cultural wisdom traditions that are related to Adinkra symbols, right? And Adinkra are visual symbols that stand for proverbs and cultural wisdom. And there's a symbol called Sankofa.
Yes.
And you're familiar with Sankofa, right? So Sankofa is the bird, that mythic bird, where their feet are facing forward, but the bird's beak is going backwards to retrieve an egg. And that piece is really important. Sometimes I get really upset when there's a picture of the Sankofa bird without the egg, right? So,
it's like, that's the whole point, the egg.
Right? Get the treasure that is going to grow, right? That is going to hatch into the future. But you have to go back and get, and the associated proverb is, it's okay to go back and retrieve what's been lost. So there's this compassion element that's
Exactly.
built in well, that we can get lost, we can forget, and we
Yeah.
do get lost, we do
Yeah.
forget. And it's
It,
okay to go back and get that treasure, get that
and get
egg,
that.
and then
Yeah.
keep moving forward. The feet of the bird are facing forward.
Yeah, I like how you are highlighting the compassionate piece here in looking back and saying it is okay. It is okay for us to say we have been lost, we have
Yeah.
been fed,
Yeah.
a narrative that has been killing us, and
Yes.
it's okay to have the humility to
Yes.
know. And
Yes.
I don't know if you want to say more about the decolonizing piece, because I say when I work with the BIPOC community, decolonizing doesn't only pertain to Caucasians, to white people.
Mhm.
There is a decolonizing piece that we have to do because we were fed
Yeah.
certain narratives that we bought, and the delusion and the things that we think, and especially those of us who come from cultures where language was, the
Mhm.
genocide of language was
Yes.
perpetrated. It's
Yes.
very difficult. So that there is there is so much to cleanse,
Yes.
right? That
Yes.
has
Yes.
to and so say more about decolonizing when it comes to us, the BIPOC
Yes.
people.
Yes. Yes. And there's another term that is
Mm-hmm,
similar to internalized racism around like the colonial mindset,
mm-hmm,
right? So
mm-hmm.
so the extent to which the harm and the damage of colonization um, shows up not just externally in
Right,
land that is stolen,
right.
right, or resources that are stolen, but it shows up in what's been internalized,
The
right? So
somatics, right?
we're not
Yeah.
just decolonizing in terms of social justice
Mm-hmm.
and but in terms of what's been internalized about what's attractive.
Mm-hmm.
Why do we
Mm-hmm.
think certain um, features of a human being are attractive in hair or skin color?
Yes.
All I mean, it gets very deep, right? The
Yeah.
ways that we have adopted,
Mm-hmm.
right, the values, the
Mm-hmm.
preferences, the belief
Mm-hmm.
systems
Mm-hmm.
of those who have colonized our indigenous lands, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that part again of the to me the importance of these mind, body, soul contemplative meditation processes is to clear space so that we can see what we're
Yeah.
carrying,
Yeah.
so that we can
Yeah.
see what we're carrying
Yeah.
internally, and that is the first step of the internal decolonizing process, is to see it and
Well,
be able to name it, like, here's, I
right.
see that this is what I'm doing.
Exactly. And in one of your articles, you talk about the illumination and elevation of Black wisdom. And we can say Black indigenous wisdom, right?
Yes, yes,
As an
yes,
act of liberation,
yes, that's
right?
right.
That's
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 right.
what we're talking about.
Yes.
That in order for us to free ourselves, to
Mhm.
really emancipate, we have to know what it is that has been done to us at both the soul and the body
Right.
level and
The
the
damage
mind
that it's
level.
done.
Yeah,
Right. So
yeah,
so how am I treating my own body? And why
yes,
am I treating my body the way I'm treating my body?
yes,
Right.
yes.
There's a whole movement around rest,
Mm-hmm,
right? And
mm-hmm.
and
And
rest. Yeah.
calm, right?
Right. But rest as resistance
Yeah, yeah,
to
yeah.
grind culture, and
Mm-hmm.
rest as resistance to the exploitation of our
Yes.
labor, and the way we have bought into that our
Mm-hmm,
value is how hard we work,
mm-hmm,
you know
mm-hmm,
and that external expectation
mm-hmm.
of work to the point where you pass out and die in the fields,
Mm-hmm.
and so reclaiming rest
Yeah.
as an emancipatory act.
Yes.
But
As
it
a right.
takes first recognizing what we have internalized,
Right.
right? And
Right.
that's that decolonizing process. What
Mm-hmm.
have I internalized about
Mm-hmm.
working hard,
Mm-hmm.
right? That has links,
Mm-hmm.
right, to
Mm-hmm.
the exploitation of my labor.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the decolonizing process is seeing clearly,
Right.
what is in there, what
Mm-hmm.
is in there, and
Mm-hmm.
how am I acting that out? How am I treating my body? What am I doing in relationships? What am I valuing in relationships?
Right.
Right? So there's a lot of inquiry and exploration that these mind body contemplative practices give us the space to do. And
Mm-hmm.
then writing comes in there, right? Because
I was
we
gonna.
open the space, right? We open the
Mm-hmm.
space for stuff to come up, and we
Mm-hmm.
need to metabolize and process it.
Mm-hmm.
And writing is
Mm-hmm.
huge resource for that.
Yeah. And yes, again, because the writing in the process I do, the writing, for instance, the being able to create an awareness of the belief system that is fueling our value
Yes,
system,
yes,
right?
yes, yes,
It
yes,
starts there. So fortunately, there is so much literature, there is so much wonderful poetry, right,
oh
out
yeah,
there
yeah, yeah,
that we can bring to a workshop and kind of going back, summon up that tradition of sitting in circles and
yes,
passing down
yes,
distilled wisdom
right,
so people can find a mirror, an image for themselves, right?
that's right,
So,
that's right,
so the writing piece, the reading piece is so essential
yes,
for
yes,
doing this decolonizing work for the BIPOC communities.
absolutely. And
I
I would throw in music there. So
mm-hmm,
I use a lot of music. I have one practice called soul sessions, which
yeah,
is really about listening, deep listening to
mm-hmm,
music,
mm-hmm,
right? And it
mm-hmm.
could be the music itself, the
The
lyrics,
drumming,
but
right?
the lyrics too,
Mm-hmm,
right?
mm-hmm,
Because there is much wisdom
mm-hmm,
embedded in lyrics. I think
mm-hmm,
songwriters, very much have spiritual downloads, right? The
mm-hmm,
thing that just
mm-hmm.
come through them in
Yeah,
the song. And the
yeah,
fact that we resonate so much with certain songs, that it just
yes,
speaks to human experience.
yeah.
And so yeah, poetry,
Mm-hmm,
song, are
mm-hmm,
all sources of wisdom
mm-hmm.
that we can access and have it come from culture,
Yeah.
and cultural experience.
And Shelly, that is, I think the beauty is that is actually our legacy,
Mhm.
that this is our ancestry
Yes,
coming alive again,
yes,
right? I've worked with the poetry therapy movement in this country, and I always remind people this is not new. This is
thank you.
indigenous
Thank you.
wisdom.
Yes,
This
yes,
is
yes.
indigenous wisdom that we
Mhm,
are,
mhm.
coming and fetching from the bottom of
Yes,
what is the essence for us. But this
yes,
is not new. This was
that's
not
right.
created as it is, so many things with the mindfulness. Again, the mindfulness wisdom, which is just a translation of indigenous wisdom.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. And it's been so powerful in this
Mm-hmm,
sabbatical,
mm-hmm,
that I've had the gift to have taken this year.
mm-hmm.
Just seeing these African cultural retentions,
Yeah,
all over,
yeah, yeah.
all over. It's been very powerful. It's been
Yeah.
very powerful. and these healing resources. You know, the
Yeah.
centrality of music and dance and art in healing, you know, and ritual, communal participation. When you said bring people together in a circle, right? Healing is not an individual act.
No.
Right?
Yeah.
And particularly in African and indigenous traditions, healing is a communal act. It's a participatory act.
Exactly.
There's a ritual involved. Right? I think about you know, my son's just lost a friend who passed away recently, and a group of them are going to the ocean for a bonfire this evening. Right? That's a ritual act, communal, participatory, healing ritual. I don't know that they think about it that way, but that's what's happening.
But it's an instinctual,
It's
it
an
is an
instinctive. We're going to
instinctual
go
thing,
do a
right?
bonfire at the beach and invite everyone, you know, who loved and cared for this young man. And, you know, so, and heal in community. So that's another cultural retention from African indigenous cultures. We heal in community.
In community. And that we, you know, the healer, the healing, the person who heals and the person who receives the healing are in the same dance.
Yes.
That's the ancient wisdom, right? That there is actually no distinction. And again, we go back to what Thich Nhat Hanh called the interbeing.
Interbeing,
it's like it's just the essence of the indigenous wisdom. That
absolutely, that interconnectedness, the material and the spiritual, past, present, future, ancestors, current, descendants, all of it is connected. Mind, body, soul, spirit. You know, this interconnectedness is in everything. Person, culture, context. We are embedded in culture and context, inseparable. Right? So this idea of interconnectedness is so important. And, you know, I think a tendency in my field in psychology is to break things up. You know, what are the 5 of this, the 6 of that? And I'm guilty, I do it, you know, but we got to be aware of this consciousness to separate, right? Versus to look at wholeness and harmony, and how do we bring together, reconnect? What are the interconnections? Nature.
Exactly.
Right? Nature, huge in African and indigenous practices. The connection to, I spent some time in Costa Rica at a yoga retreat, Afro Flow Yoga. So it was an integration of African dance and culture with yoga. And we focused on the elements. And we really brought in, you know, the orishas, right? In focusing on the elements. And so this is I think of Dagara cosmology, Malidoma Somay's beautiful work, the healing wisdom of Africa, and the emphasis on nature, right, as a part of our interconnectedness. So this theme of interconnectedness is where the healing is. That's where the healing is.
I feel great enthusiasm when I look around. I mean, I found you and so many other people. When I look around and I see the work that is being done, is very different than, as you were saying, what was happening in the 80s and even the 90s. That we are in a very good momentum. So what is one, I know that you have a commitment right after this. What is one thing that you will want to leave our audience with in terms of knowing what's coming next? Where do you think our attention has to be in terms of looking at what is coming next in order to solidify this wholeness that we are seeing is here, that we have co-created?
Yes, you know, I think in some ways it's a process of the people like yourself and others who are doing this work to continue to do the work and to continue to develop practices that integrate indigenous wisdom and indigenous spirituality, indigenous worldviews as resources. And for me, it's not an either or, it's a both and.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
again, not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, but
Yeah.
there's resources that we aren't tapping into that can be healing for BIPOC people.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think we need to continue to do that work. I think we also need, how do I put it? We need to network with each other, because I think there's some every time I meet someone, I'm going like, wow, you're doing that.
Yeah,
You know,
right.
so I mean, someone in this sort of zone that we're talking about. So I think there are people out there who are finding this path, and we need to connect with each other and really allow this to multiply, because my experience is with the people that I work with is it's powerful stuff, and it can be effective. And I think we need to do more of it. So if I look forward, I'd like us all to come together, maybe a conference, maybe, you know, a think tank. I don't know how to think about
something.
it, but something so that all of this amazing work that's going on can be pooled and then magnified, amplified.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. And I hope I'll get to have you back and talk more about the development of, you know, the work that you are doing during this sabbatical. So I would love to have you back maybe next year, if not before, if we are able to put together some kind of, you know, networking, which is like, that's the old thing, right? That's our ancestors knew. They were always networking.
Yeah, sharing resources, right? Right. Yes. Well, it's been my pleasure, Marianella. I'm glad we got to make it happen.
Yes, thank you. And yes, I know that I'm going to have you back here. So I also want to thank the listeners for listening to What a Word is Worth. You can access today's episode at Anchor, YouTube, and other platforms. And if you're interested, hit the subscribe button in your podcast app. And also, if you find this program beneficial, leave us a review. I am with you in love and compassion, always, always.